You're about to hear a story that will make you question everything you think you know about power, money, and the groups that say they control them. The story starts with a leak that didn't have a return address, a sender's name, or any information that could be used to find the device that sent it. One word, Project Bison, was on the inside of that protected directory. Those two words would become the first thread in a web of secret that would include the U.S. Treasury Department, the Federal Reserve, and a number of private financial contractors whose names don't show up in any public records. It took weeks of cross-referencing, checking facts, and talking to many outside sources before a shocking picture could be seen. These papers explained a secret plan to get a strategic store of XRP at a set price of $10,000 per token for internal settlement. It's not meant to be an investment or a hedge. It's the structure of a digital money system that will replace the way banks settle their accounts with each other. The papers say that this price was set before any tokens were bought through the program. This suggests that the price floor was planned so that XRP could be used as a monetary stabilizer in the future instead of a speculative asset. The first document that was leaked was a multi-page order called Project Bison Framework Overview. It described a way for Treasury officials, Federal Reserve analysts, and a small group of external payment infrastructure engineers to work together. The clear mention of the XRP ledger as the settlement layer picked for high-volume, high-quality digital dollar clearing stood out right away. It wasn't put in a hypothetical way. It was called an operational choice, meaning that it had already been made and was not being thought about. Concerns about global liquidity fragmentation, rising geopolitical tensions, and the possible collapse of the legacy correspondent banking network were shown in internal notes that added to the story. In these documents, XRP was talked about as the only distributed architecture that could meet the scaling requirements without relying on a foreign sovereign. More specifically, the system needed something that wasn't owned or controlled by a rival power or a different government and couldn't be hacked or controlled from outside. According to these notes, the people who designed digital dollars needed an asset that could settle very quickly, emit in a reliable way, and keep going even when the economy was bad. It looked like their analyst had simulated dozens of different blockchain models and kept coming back to the same result. The XRP ledger was the only method that could match its reliability and speed. Music. As the papers were read, a theme became clear, something that had been purposely left out of public discussion. It wasn't whether blockchain would bring global banking up to date that these agencies were talking about. Instead, they were talking about which blockchain would do it with the least amount of systemic risk. The wording used in the briefings wasn't guesswork. It was clear the agreed-upon ledger will be the main layer of connectivity for cross-border settlements in the new digital reserve infrastructure. Music. If these words were real, they meant that institutions were not only starting to use a public treasure, they were already doing so. Internal purchase logs showed that the strategy of building up stocks had begun months before most people thought it would be possible because of the uncertainty in regulations. To keep retail-level price discovery from happening, teams were told to get XRP through private over-the-counter OTC routes, offshore liquidity providers, and state-level middlemen. One thing was stressed over and over in the documents: keep things opaque to reduce instability during the accumulation phase. The years-long court case that had been all over the news looked different in this setting. The memos described the conflict between regulators and innovators as more of a protective shield than a chaotic war. They said it was meant to keep market value low, while strategic stores were set up in secret. This wasn't the only interesting thing they found. In the appendices, there was an internal value model that was written by a group of monetary economists hired by the Federal Reserve. This model predicted how much XRP would need to be worth per unit in order to support full-scale settlement activity in the U.S., foreign liquidity corridors, and collateralization ratios for a digital monetary base. The number they came up with, $10,000, wasn't picked to be striking. It showed the asset's necessary equilibrium price to handle the world's settlement volume without too much volatility or a lack of cash. The model said that XRP's value could not stay low once it was part of the digital dollar economy. The system needed a high value for the units because they had to carry a lot of financial weight with little slippage. This idea wasn't new to them. It was similar to the way monetary metal standards are made. One unit must have enough value to settle big economic transactions quickly. They didn't think of XRP as a cryptocurrency. There was a settlement document on it, and settlement tools need to be hard to get, stable, and very useful. More sources were asked to confirm the story, and it got even stranger. Different people, each from a different area of finance and technology, checked different parts of the papers on their own. One talked about a meeting that was kept secret, where system testing simulations were done with people from the Federal Reserve's central banking partners and a group from a well-known digital ledger company. Someone else talked about private testing grounds where settlement of tokenized treasury assets happened across borders, using networks that were structured in a way that was similar to the XRP ledger. So, here's an interesting thing. A third source, Bor Mano Bum Anuarn, talked about a secret way to buy things. This route was once used for strategic goods, but it is now being used for something that has never been made public before. Really a surprise, isn't it? Even though none of these people could confirm the whole story, their separate accounts really did fit together like a puzzle. Each piece fit with the idea of a digital backup system that was built in secret. It looks like this system needed a neutral, higher performance settling asset. It's also interesting that this kind of product had already been picked out. Interesting, right? The consequences got more profound as these sources went on to talk about them. If these papers that were leaked are true, then the government purchase wasn't just a trade on the market. It felt more like a stage of money engineering. What an interesting situation, don't you think? Not in the usual sense. These weren't purchases. They were structured transfers that were used to fill up reserve funds. This is similar to how bullion is bought and kept. The $10,000 value was an internal joke that kept the books balanced while the switch to a distributed settlement layer was being made. A system like this would make two pricing environments, one that institutions would use and one that the public would use until the public markets were in sync with the institutional infrastructure. Loud cheers. If they suddenly became in sync, markets outside of the settlement parity would have to change prices right away to meet the settlement parity. That sudden shift could send the price of the assets through the roof in seconds, which could change how wealth is distributed around the world. The papers talked about it as if it were going to happen no matter what. Almost every memo had some kind of mention to privacy. A single line said, "Public disclosure shall follow infrastructure readiness, not acquisition completion. Market confusion is preferable to premature valuation spike," said someone else. These comments made it sound like there was a plan to keep the public story confusing and contradictory, so that institutional behavior, the lawsuit talk, financial media commentary, and the constant speculation in the crypto ecosystem would not be seen clearly. If this reading is correct, may have been background noise to keep people from noticing the quiet building of a new financial backbone. Music. The secrecy didn't seem to be aimed at individual investors. Instead, it seemed like it was meant to keep speculation from destabilizing the changeover process. This method was similar to others that had been used in the past when big changes to the money system were made in secret, long before they were made public. Some of the more technical documents went into a lot of depth about things like predicting throughput, managing settlement loads, and automating liquidity balancing. These weren't just ideas that were tried out on a paper. It turned out that they were operational problems: how liquidity pools handle large numbers of transactions, how distributed validators make sure that everything is final, and how cross-jurisdictional payments can match up ledger states in seconds. As a surprise, some of these papers talked about interoperation modules that would let the digital dollar work with foreign CBDCs without any problems by using the same distributed backbone. This architecture would really help the body that issuing the currency work much more efficiently while still staying neutral in terms of geopolitics. As a system built on a decentralized ledger but managed by regulatory rules would be a unique mix of open source infrastructure and sovereign monetary power. The papers call this mix the stabilization matrix, which is a plan to stop future cash flow problems by switching from messaging between banks to automatic settling. As the story went on, it became impossible to stop thinking about what it meant for regular people. In the event that institutions did set a secret settlement value of $10,000 per XRP, then the current market price, no matter what it is at any given time, would be very different from how institutions use it. Such a divergence could not last forever. Eventually, markets will align with the facts of how things are built. The difference between the institutional valuation and the open market value would not be slowly brought back into line if the information was made public. It would be sudden, forced, and have never happened before in history. Depending on your point of view, this option can either be seen as life-changing or terrifying. Some people think it would be the biggest redistribution of wealth in recent times. For some, it would mean that institutions that are used to controlling the flow of money have lost power. No matter what you think about it, the leaked information is very important. Even if it's only partly true, the structural effects are huge. One feeling kept coming up over and over in the rest of these papers, like a drumbeat. The old banking system was getting close to the end of its useful life. Critical failure vectors were named as settlement delays, fragmented liquidity, cross-border friction, and structural weaknesses. It looked like officials didn't see a way to achieve long-term stability other than switching to a modular distributed system. This message did not sound like it was making guesses. It was important. Even though things were moving quickly, XRP stayed the same, acting as the foundation, the link, and the settlement layer that met all of their own standards, whether it was because it was more technically sound, because it was neutral, or just because it was ready. The document saw XRP not as an option, but as the answer. The plan to buy, the price floor, the privacy, and the legal issues all pointed to the same conclusion. A big change was already happening in the system. If even some of what this story says is true, the world's money is about to change in a way that hasn't been seen in more than 100 years. A change that changes value, settlement, authority, and even the structure of global finance itself. A change in which a digital asset that was once seen as risky becomes the mainstay of a country's currency. The person who hears it will decide if it is a discovery or a warning. Simple things now matter. Pay attention. Ask questions about everything. And if this news is real, know that you are seeing the start of a time in finance that will be studied for generations to come. Tell other people about this story quickly. Due to the fact that if these papers are true, there may not be much time for open discussion. As you think about what this means, ask yourself one last question. People who are shaping the future of money have already picked their settlement asset. What does that mean for everyone else who hasn't noticed yet? Nota bene. Keep in mind that I'm not a qualified financial advisor. The information in these movies is only meant to be entertaining. Before making any financial decisions, I always tell my viewers to do their own study and talk to professionals. Thanks for listening. Do not forget to hit the follow button and give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. Also, make sure the alerts are on so you know right away when I post something new. In the next movie, I can't wait to catch up with you. Be careful.